It has been brought to our attention that depending on the platform that you listen to, you can no longer hear some of our previous episodes.
Some of our favorite episodes.
Some of the ones where people would reach out and say, hey, listen, I can't believe that you talked to insert whatever name here.
And honestly, it makes us a little sad that you can't go back in time and have a listen because the stories were really incredible.
We reference a lot of times, we had a chance to talk with so-and-so in the past. And if you can't go back, then it's kind of just, So we wanted to bring some of those guests, some of those former guests back into the spotlight.
We're going to call it like a rerun, I think.
A Why Me Project rerun.
Do you remember those?
I do. Back in the day, or you used to throw the tape into the VCR and, we're dating ourselves.
We are, but a rerun was the opportunity to rewatch one of your favorite episodes. Now everything's so accessible. Well, we thought it was.
Yeah, exactly. So without further ado,
here's your Why Me Project rerun. I'm excited because I know her, and I've never really had a chance to talk with her about her story, and I've heard it's pretty incredible, and it's encouraging and inspiring, so I'm excited for today.
What kind of relationship is that where you don't know anything about the person who you're friends with?
Well, I know like the ish, but you're like...
No, it's fine. Yeah.
Dear Diary, today I discovered I am the worst friend ever.
Leah Grey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Well, apparently you and I are as close as friends as you and Hollie are, so.
Oh, man. I know the story-ish, but not like the meat and potatoes.
All right. Well, Leah, we like to ask the skill testing question because we never know where it's going to go. Who are you and where did you come from?
My name is Leah. Grey is not my real last name. It's a fake name, so there's that. I am Canadian and lived in the States for about 10 years, and I just came back to Canada.
Welcome home.
Thanks. Happy to be here. Got locked in as soon as I got here, so I was glad to be on this side of the border with my family.
Yeah, no kidding. Growing up in Ontario, in Canada, how was that for you?
So I was raised in Mennonite country. I'm not Mennonite, but we went to a Mennonite Brethren church in Mennonite country. So I had a pretty old school, sheltered, really sweet upbringing, actually, lemonade on the porch, being left out in the sun kind of thing.
Nice.
I hated it. But now looking back, it was idyllic,
So you grow up in Mennonite country. And was there a thought of when I grow up, I want to move to urban society? I want to move to a big city because this Mennonite country is just not for me?
So my whole life, all I wanted to do was live in New York and wear high heels on a daily basis and not feel weird about it. That was pretty much my life goal. I had every Vogue cover on my wall and every escape plan to get to New York City. Second place would have been France. So anywhere but where I was. And I did move there.
You moved to France?
New York.
Oh, I was like, you moved to Paris?
No.
Holly's just excited because she's learning all about this friendship.
Oh my gosh. We worked together. What got you out of the nice quintessential, iced tea on the porch kind of situation got you to New York?
I thought I was really bad, actually, I should say. I thought I was very rebellious and did whatever I could to kind of hang out with the alternative crowd. I was in a couple bands. I actually dropped out of college to join a band kind of thing. So definitely a lot of the wrong places all of the time. And I made quite a few bad decisions, which ended up landing me in New York. Not necessarily was a bad decision, but a lot of bad decisions that got me there. Mm-hmm. And I was very rebellious.
You're an accomplished author. You're in a band. Was music then what you wanted to be when you grew up, or it was still just high heels in New York City was still just the goal?
You know what? I am so good, not great, but good at many, 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 many little things. And I honestly cannot pick one thing. I like everything. My parents forbid me from being in the music industry, so that wasn't really an option. And I came upon writing accidentally. That was not, I mean, my grade 2 teacher said I should be a writer. It wasn't the plan. I wanted to decorate and, I don't know. Lots of hobbies.
Now, you also did a stylist kind of thing, didn't you?
Yeah, I was a hairdresser before I started blogging. It was, I became a hairdresser because I didn't know what else to do. And I was pretty good at doing hair, and I figured it was better than working a minimum wage job at McDonald's. So I became a hairdresser because the tips were better than waitressing. And that was that. Yeah. So I did that for probably almost 10 years as well.
Was hairdressing then the full-time job, or were you doing that, but also doing music, but also writing at the time?
No, I quit music to do hair for the most part. I tried to quit music to do hair. And then I quit hair to start writing. I started writing while I was doing hair, but I was really adamant that I would not become a poor writer. So I refused to quit. And then God kind of had me like laid off. So I continued on with the writing. And I've been fighting this blogging, writing thing for like 6 years, and God just doesn't let me stop.
Why?
You know what? I'm very honest. I find that I'm saying things that other people just won't say. And I think sometimes you just want somebody to just be willing to just tell the truth. I find that like commonly what I see a lot come along, I work with addiction, right? So mainly I help wives of addicts, and I will have girlfriends who come along. And I notice that in most realms, the girlfriends are treated very much like the wives because they have kind of similar relationships. Usually they're already living together. And I'm really honest, like it's just not smart. There's nothing wise about dating, marrying, being engaged to an addict. And I have no bones about telling them it's not smart and they should just leave.
Did you come to that point in your life because you were always very honest, or because of what you'd been through that you just felt you wish somebody had been that honest with you?
I was always very honest, but I was not always very wise. So I think my husband had an addiction when we first got married, kind of early on. And I think through that, I gained a lot of wisdom, but also confidence, because I was very shy before that. It doesn't seem like that maybe, but I really was. And so now I just feel like I can hear God better at this point. I feel like I've grown. I feel like I'm a 40-year-old in a 30-year-old body. And it's just a lot easier when you're confident to be able to speak the truth.
Did you know, or did you have an idea that he had an addiction when you guys were together?
So I knew that he partied. I thought he was just kind of like every other, we were in our 20s. I thought he was like every other 20-year-old who went to parties and sometimes drank too much and occasionally would, do like a party drug. And we lived in different countries. So we would date long distance, and I didn't move in with him until like right before we got married. So that, So I moved to New York and I lived with him there. And I didn't really see it then as much either. It wasn't until after I got pregnant with my first child with him that I really started to see it, because he would not stop drinking or stop going to his friends. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm pregnant. What are you doing?
Was that a bit of a shock to think that you knew somebody so well and yet maybe you didn't know them as well as you thought?
I think I was harder on myself. Like looking back, I should have seen it. I should have seen that ahead of time. And I just was too much in love and wanting to live in New York and all of these things. I really didn't want to see it.
At some point, it has to come to a head where you either deal with the situation some way, somehow he deals with the situation some way, somehow. What did that look like?
I was very naive and I had no idea what was really happening. At first, it was a year of thinking that he was drinking too much. And I found out he started going to AA and going to meetings with a friend for support in the drinking. It was so easy for him to stop drinking. So for about a year, he just didn't drink at all. And I was like, wow, he's amazing. I'm so proud of him. He's like great at it. But what I didn't realize was that he was drinking to cover up drug use. So I had no idea. It wasn't until almost 2 years in that I really started to see it come to a head. Some information came out about him and his past that he just didn't want me to know. And that sent him over the edge. He got suicidal. The drug use escalated like exponentially. It was just unbelievable. And I think I see that happen a lot too with other people. Something will happen and then it kind of triggers this thing that was somewhat manageable or functioning beforehand. So yeah, it was really bad. He was in and out of the hospital and it got to the point where I just kind of forced him into rehab.
So he's going through all of this. Essentially, or eventually, there's like this ultimatum. It always feels like, you clean up or I'm gonna ship out. At some point, was there that fork in the road where it was either you're with me or you're against me?
There was many forks in the road, which I think is something I didn't know going into this ahead of time. Nobody tells you that you might have to make that decision multiple times. So the first time to get him into rehab wasn't so bad. And he did an outpatient program for about like 6 or 7 months. Then he started relapsing again. But at that point, it was so bad because we'd already went through all this other stuff. So we were visiting my parents in Canada and he had showed up. He was super late. He was supposed to have been there hours ago. His eyes were just bloodshot. He just looked horrible. And I was like, I know you're high. Like you can't be here. Like I know there's something wrong. And he was trying to say he was sick for like days. Like, oh no, I'm just sick. I'm like, I know there's something wrong with you. So I just made a decision to not put up with it anymore. I called my landlord, I called and hired movers, and I went back to the States with my dad from Canada. I packed up everything we owned in 2 days. I left him with like a mattress, his bicycle, and his computer, and I left. And the kids never went back. Like my son was in school, they just never went back. I thought that would be it. It took him 3 more months after that to go into rehab. And he went for another 9 months. And then I found myself again having to make that same fork in the road decision at least 2 times after that.
What about support? Did you have the outlet to get the support that you needed?
I had parents who were helpful. It's hard for family members to help you. They're really close to the situation and it really hurts them. So that wasn't necessarily the best form of support. They tried their best, but they were hurt as well. I tried therapy many times. And honestly, it's horrible. Like most of the people that I went to, they're like, oh, well, you're codependent. Well, you must be an enabler. Well, you're this, you're that. And they're very quick to label the spouse. And I had this deep conviction, like I was not supposed to leave my husband from God. I did not want to stay. I was very ready to go. And God kept telling me, no, like you need to wait. And I had a very hard time finding anybody who would support me in staying or who could give me the tools I needed to stay. And pastors on the flip side were like the total opposite. Like, oh, you need to be submissive. And you need to let your husband lead and you need to let him do this and you have to stop taking over the finances. And I was like, no, you don't get it. Like, I can't give him our money. I am taking our money, like he gets a little allowance from me and that's it. And I'm not giving it back to him. I don't care if he's a man. So it was really, really, really hard. We had one pastor in Canada who was actually my parents' pastor. He wasn't even ours. And he was very, very supportive. And he connected us with a Christian counselor who was a former physician who really just kind of did stuff just, off the cuff. Well, it turns out he had been like very good friends with my mentor growing up in Mennonite country. And he was amazing. He informally diagnosed my husband as bipolar. He gave us so much support. And I don't think without him, we would have been okay. So seeing him was like a huge turning point, but he was very, very, very expensive. Like I put every appointment on my credit card. We could not afford it.
Do you find it odd that there are a lot of like pastors who are in that counseling role who maybe aren't equipped to deal with something like that? Because to say, hey, take over let your husband do the finances and those sorts of things, you can't do that when you're in those situations. Was it just seemingly weird having grown up in a church to get that kind of advice?
We've gotten so far away from what Jesus wanted when it comes to Christianity. Like, our faith is so like whitewashed across the board. It's very, and that's great if you've grown up sheltered and okay. But I think there's kind of this like expectation that you should be sheltered and okay if you're a Christian and you believe in Jesus. And it's just not the way that it goes. So, although like at the time it was really hard, when I look now at what happened, I'm not surprised about it at all. I think it's just kind of like a side effect of how our churches are today and kind of the Western Christianity, you'll never have to go through suffering thing that we teach.
And that is not true.
You
still go through suffering. We're human.
You do. Yes. Mm-hmm. And like, my book is called No One Brings You a Casserole When Your Husband Goes to Rehab. And nobody brought me one. That's why, because nobody helped me. Like, the whole Christian community, I felt very abandoned. And it's partially my fault. I wasn't overly friendly. It's not like I was calling them and reaching out. But when I did reach out for help, I didn't feel like anybody really showed up. One pastor actually gave me a book that had this whole chapter on how to like sexually submit to your husband. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, you have no idea what I am going through right now. Like, it's so bad. He's like, well, if you could just get over that part, like, just do that, maybe he would be more responsive to what you've asked of him. It's like, oh my gosh, no.
How's your relationship now? Are you and your husband together, or?
Yes, we're still together. He's going on, 2015 to 2021 now. He's been off of drugs. He had a little relapse in there when he got fired from a job, but otherwise everything has been great. He's still dealing with mental illness, so that's difficult. I wouldn't say it's like a perfect thing, but I love him, and he's fun, and he's trying so hard, and his heart is in the right place. So I'm very proud of him.
How is he with you being so open about his addiction, your relationship, and everything that is going on in your lives?
He's gotten used to it now. That's why I changed my last name, because he really just didn't want it to be associated with him. And he has a very good corporate job. So I am still fairly cautious about who I say what to in general, but he's definitely getting better. It's so far in the past now. I think the longer it is, the more comfortable he gets, but he has no desire to talk about it.
During this process, though, you also did start your ministry when you were in New York. Why start it? Why try to connect with other women who were going through a similar situation?
So I started it because I felt like everybody I went to was really hopeless. And everywhere I went, it was just doom and gloom, and they're never going to change. And this is just the way it is. And they have no control. And I started looking at kind of what the 12 steps teaches. And I'm very much against them. I don't think it's biblical at all. I think it's quite satanic, actually. So I just really didn't want to subscribe to any of that. Like, oh, he can never change. It will never get better. So I decided to just kind of be a different voice.
And how did people respond to that?
Oh, they love it. I didn't do any marketing. I didn't do anything really at all. I had no idea what I was doing, and I had 130,000 readers after a year.
Wow.
So it really exploded. Yeah.
No kidding.
It did very, very well.
Why do you think that was? Was it because you were offering a different perspective?
Yeah, like, it's happy and as happy as it can be. I mean, I'm trying to this is life. This happens. Like, how many of us did drugs when we were growing up? Like, it's just what happens. Some people are more susceptible to being addicted, and maybe they have trauma or they have things they have to work through, and we can be sad about it every day and let it ruin our lives, or we can choose to just face it head on and do the best that we can and enjoy the moments that we do have. And if God has told you to stay, then you stay, and you figure it out, and he's going to make it all right. It's, yeah.
The answer to this might be no, just because I don't know your answer. But have you found in the last year and a half, 2 years, that maybe more people are reaching out to you and having a conversation about mental health or addiction or depression because of the COVID? And it seems as though more people are dealing with a lot of this stuff.
I think that the mental health and addiction stuff is getting swept under the rug, honestly. I had like 4 people overdosing on my news feed every week from between my ministry and one other one. That's it. And at least 4 every week. And there was nothing. There was no outcry. I don't feel like they're getting the support that they need at all. The wives are most certainly not getting support. Rehabs we're not taking people for a long time. Thankfully they are again, but they weren't. And, now I know there's a 6-month wait list. Somebody was just talking to me, and her husband can't get in for 6 months. Like, he's an alcoholic who does pills as well. He wants to go. Like, 6 months could be a death sentence for their relationship, for their marriage. It's bad.
Mm-hmm. Man, that'd be tough, knowing that you need help and people say the first step's admitting it. And then what? Great. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. And cutting off your connection already, isolation, I think, is the hardest part for the wives, at least, because they're already feeling like they can't relate to normal couples, right? They can't relate to them. They don't get it. And people just don't get it. So this extra isolation on top of everything else has been really, really, really difficult. And even online, I've noticed people are having a harder time reaching out. They just can't take any more darkness and any more anything. And reaching out is already getting really, really difficult.
There's no one size fits all. There's no one answer to this question. I'm assuming that there's no broad statement that you have either, but what do you say to someone who's in a relationship with someone who has an addiction?
I mean, I like to ask questions. Instead of just giving advice, I like to ask them questions. Like, when did you get married? How long have you been together? Maybe they're not married. How long have you been together? Do you have children? Do you have a way to financially provide for yourself? Are you feeling like God has called you to stay in this marriage? Do you feel like God is telling you to leave for a time? Have you considered separating, and not divorce, but just separating for a while, just to kind of get out of the situation? Do you have a support system? Do you have friends and family nearby? Do you have a place to go? Are they abusive? I mean, there's a lot of questions. So
there's no one answer to solve that problem.
No, but talking is so important. They just need to talk, honestly. And they need to know that if there's a problem, that they have somebody that they can call. It's so important to have somebody to call.
It actually might be encouraging for some, just to know that it's not a system that you have to follow, that everybody is different. There's different experiences and different results based on the situation. So I love that, talking. Find somebody to talk to.
And you know what is amazing to me is the health side of it, which is a whole other conversation, but I don't see that getting treated and talked about much at all. But we know how your body gets depleted of nutrients and how tired you get just from stress. So for both the person addicted and for the family members, dealing with actual health is so, so important, vitamins and minerals and supplements. And are you eating, and are they hypoglycemic, and all of that is really important.
Well, this is the Why Me Project podcast, so I'm going to ask you that very question. Has there been a point in your life, whether it was in a valley or a mountaintop, where you asked of God, why me?
I feel like I don't really ask that question very often, because I really feel like a lot of this stuff that has happened to me has been a result of my own behavior. I have sinned. I made bad choices. I ignored God, those kinds of things. I think the only like why me I've really had is when I was working really hard on my blog for like 6 years or so, and I had plateaued, like out of nowhere, just plateaued for about 2.5 years. And then I was like, oh, you know, why me? But I mean, it happens to everyone. It just happens to everyone. I'm not really like a why me person, if that makes sense.
But that's good, right? I mean, some people ask why me though when things are going well on the flip side too. So why me's don't always have to be in a place of lamenting, if you will.
Yeah, no, not at all. I don't know.
But no why me. Except
Not
for the
really.
plateau. The blog.
Yeah, the plateau was really, because I was working so hard. I was like, oh, fine. Like, why? What am I doing?
You needed to let go and let God, right?
Yeah. I took a break for like a year. I was like, forget it.
Doesn't matter anyway. No one's reading this.
It's like on its own. I'll just leave it for a while. And I did some crafts and, you know, rejuvenated myself.
And maybe that's what you needed.
Your new book is 6 years in the making, out this fall. I feel closer now to you than Hollie is with you at Hello Leah Grey on Insta, leahgrey.com. Appreciate you taking some time and sharing your heart.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to an old episode, a past guest of our Why Me Project rerun.
Something that we're starting now because there are so many episodes that we really did love. And they've kind of disappeared from the digital world.
And speaking of digital world, I did a little recon. There are at least 9 different platforms in which you can listen to the Why Me Project podcast.
Okay.
So there's no excuses, but I mean, some of the main ones like Apple Podcast and or Spotify.
And you could always head to our social media accounts to stay up to date, as each and every Wednesday we have a brand new episode for Why Me Project. And you can also let us know if there's someone that you would like to hear on a future episode.
At Why Me Project on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Why Me Project at Outlook.com.